Welcome to Faithcast, a Faith in the Forest ministry. Be sure to hit that notification bell to stay up to date on great new content. Now, here is your host, Pastor Keith.
Hey everybody, welcome to Faithcast, where we share the truth and love without pushing religion. Before we get into the meat of today's video, I have a couple things I want to talk to you about really quick. I sort of need your help. As we do Faithcast, we really do it because we like to talk about a few current topics and as they relate to our faith, and we like to be able to have our messages put online for those who don't feel comfortable going to church. We don't ever really expect to have a huge following or this is going to be some giant YouTube channel. So most of the time I don't worry too much about, hey, subscribe, hit the notification button. However, I'm struggling right now because the Methodist videos that we have done and the few more that are going to be coming, I'm going to mention here in just a second, there's been a lot of feedback and a lot of questions asked to me. And I struggle with it because I used to be a licensed local pastor with the United Methodist denomination, and I left. And when I did so, I feel like I left behind a lot of the rural churches and communities where I had served, and they're not as well informed of what's going on. And I know I've said this in other videos, that one of the reasons, actually the reason I talk about the United Methodist Church and the impending split is just because I want to make sure the legitimate, unbiased information is getting out there. And so one of the ways for us to do that is for you guys to help me, and that is to actually subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, make a comment. The comments and the likes change the algorithm so that more people will get to see this and actually, if they feel like they need to talk about it at their local level, they'll be informed and be able to do so. It's the best way for us to get the word out there so that everybody knows what's going on. And it doesn't matter which side of the platform you're on. Now, as far as upcoming Methodist videos, we have a few more lined up, and as I look over into the queue here in the studio, looking down our list, we're going to dig into the Book of Discipline just a little bit. We're going to have a little bit of fun with it. Then we're going to talk about how many churches are leaving the denomination right now, and what about the auxiliary institutions? How are they going to be affected by this impending split, and where will they stand on doctrine? We're talking about the Methodist universities, the camps, hospitals. Most of those don't stand on doctrine, but we're going to do a video on that and ask that question. Most importantly, because, and the reason this has really taken off is I did that rambling video about us leaving the denomination, and we left for financial reasons. It wasn't even over this issue of human sexuality. People have asked question after question after question to me. So the final Methodist related video that I will be doing is a step-by-step, here's how we went from being in the denomination to being an independent church. You guys can take it for what it's worth. Other reason it's important for us to get this word out as soon as possible, because what I'm talking about today has a deadline on it for all of you who are going to be in this conversation of what is your local church going to do. So let's get started. So I had heard rumblings that there was a provision and there were churches leaving the denomination, which is why we're having a video coming up about the number of churches who have already left the denomination and how are they getting out with their buildings. And I got to tell you, I sort of feel like an idiot because this happened clear back in 2019. And I'd like to say on my behalf, I didn't know about it because, one, I'm not in the denomination, so I'm not getting direct word from anybody. Plus the pandemic hit and people haven't been meeting. And most importantly, a lot of this has sort of been overshadowed by the fact that in the denomination, there's been this huge brouhaha over when are they going to have their big general conference and make the final vote, because it was supposed to happen in 2020, but then they didn't because of the pandemic. So then they were going to meet in 2022, but now they're not going to. So now they're not going to meet until 2024, and everybody's talking about that. And this whole little provision is sort of getting washed in the background. And so we need to talk about it because, let me read this, because of the current deep conflict within the United Methodist Church around issues of human sexuality, a local church shall have a limited right under the provisions of this paragraph to disaffiliate. I am taking that directly from an article from News written by Heather Hahn, but the article didn't come out until February of 2022. This is now being reported, and I'm urging all of you to go read the article written by Heather Hahn in UM News, February 9th, 2022. I will have the link in the description. She does a fantastic job explaining all of it. I give her huge kudos. It's too bad that the New York Times and the Washington Post doesn't have journalists of that level of integrity. So, starting with her article, let's look at the provision that was made in the 2016 Book of Discipline. It was voted on in 2019 by the denomination's Judicial Council, which most people call the Supreme Court of the United Methodist Church. Why does a denomination need to have a judicial council? Sure. Human sexuality. That's the issue that's really eating away at the denomination from within. Okay. So anyhow, the Judicial Council of the United Methodist denomination voted on paragraph 2553, page 776 of the 2016 Book of Discipline, but this was voted on in 2019, and we are now finding about it in 2022. It is disaffiliation of local churches over issues related to human sexuality, and as you read through all of it, it says, number one, the basis. Because of current deep conflict within the United Methodist Church around issues of human sexuality, a local church shall have a limited right under the provisions of this paragraph to disaffiliate from the denomination for reasons of conscience regarding a change in the requirements and provisions of the Book of Discipline related to the practice of homosexuality or the ordination or marriage of self-avowed practicing homosexuals as resolved and adopted by the 2019 General Conference, or the actions or inactions of its annual conference related to these issues which follow. That's a really important last line right there. The actions or inactions of its annual conference related to these issues. That's really the crux of all this, and this is the big problem, is that there's a Book of Discipline. Some conferences are holding to it very stringently. Other conferences are saying, no, we're not going to follow that. We don't agree with it. We want it changed, which is why everybody's waiting for the big brouhaha, which will be now in 2024. But as everything is written in the Book of Discipline right now, and I'm not going to go into all of the details of it, I will include a link to this PDF so you can see the changes, but pull out your Book of Discipline, and as you look through it, there's a conflict of interpretation. When we do our next video on having fun with the Book of Discipline, I'll bring up a couple of them. Anybody on either side of the spectrum here, if you're in the reconciling ministries, if you're in support or defending the LGBT community, then yeah, you may read this and go, we want out of the denomination. If you're a church that's holding to the Wesley Covenant Association and you want the traditional aspects of it, you might be reading all of this right now and going, yeah, we want out of the denomination. Because this has just muddled things even more than it already was for lay people like us, right? And that's who I'm talking to. I know that people way up in the denomination, all the lawyers and the accountants that are following all of this stuff, they're like, oh no, it makes perfect sense to us. Let's roll on. This is why it's so important. It is really important for you if you're in a Methodist church, if you have Methodist family members, churches that you know of, to please subscribe to this channel and share this video so they can actually understand, because there is a time limit. Item number 2 in paragraph 2553 marks this, that you have until December 31st, 2023, and that it shall not be used after this date. That's it. If you're going to get out of the denomination, you have to have everything done by December of 2023. And you might be thinking, well, all right, that gives us a year and a half. That's a lot of time. Oh, no, it doesn't. Because let's jump back to the article by Miss Hahn, which again, she did a really great job. I'm just going to read part of it directly, quoting to it. Here it is on the screen for you. They later passed legislation that permits the disaffiliation, right? That's what I just read for you. And it must include these 3 things. Approval for disaffiliation by at least 2/3 majority of a church's professing members present at the vote, which means, and we can jump this back to the actual paragraph 2553, but to bring that into more aspect, I want you to think about this. If you're going to have a disaffiliation vote, then you have to decide to have it, then you have to announce it. It has to be announced long enough that everybody has a chance to know about it. There has to be discussion on it. Your district superintendent pretty sure has to be there for the vote. Then you have to vote as a church. So you have all that time period to actually get at the local level to decide yay or nay. If you decide yay, then it goes on to the next one. Then there has to be an establishment of terms and conditions between the existing local church and the conference board of trustees. She summed it up. If we go back to the book of discipline, or the provision in the book of discipline, in part 4, subsection A of paragraph 2553, it says at the bottom of it, annual conferences may develop additional standard terms that are not inconsistent with the standard form of this paragraph, which means the Supreme Court of the denomination said if churches want to go, you have to let them go. However, you can attach any reasonable strings to it that you want to, which means even if you vote at the local level, you still have to abide by whatever conditions that your annual conference wants to put on. One example of this, as I talk to individuals out in the rural community, one gentleman told me that their church has had the conversation about whether they want to leave or not leave, and they're struggling with it. They're actually struggling with it because they're part of a charge, and they don't even know if the two churches agree, which I brought up in an earlier video. What are you going to do if you have two local churches? One is leaning more towards the liberal side, the other one's leaning towards the conservative side. You have one pastor serving both of them. What are you going to do? So I talked to an individual who's in a situation where that is actually happening, but that wasn't his biggest concern. His biggest concern was, well, we've talked about it, but the annual conference told us, so his annual conference told him that, sure, you can leave, but you're not allowed to go independent. You must join another denomination. Now, that's all I heard from him. I wasn't able to confirm that. I wasn't going to call the annual conference and ask them because, well, last time I talked to them, they threatened me. I don't know. I can't confirm whether or not that's actually truly how it's being conveyed, or if he misunderstood, or if they're saying if you're going to leave, you have to join. If you're going to leave and you're going to leave on the conservative side, you have to join the World Methodist Church, or whatever it's becoming. I don't know. But my point of saying all that is the annual conference can put conditions on your leaving if you want to take your building with you, which now adds to this whole time frame of being done by 2023. There's one last part of this that in the original article by Ms. Hahn, in these parts, the last one, it says ratification of a church's disaffiliation by a simple majority at annual conference. This is one part I still don't have all the details on. I'm going to ask you, if you guys are in that situation, find out about this, leave a comment on it, because I could not find where this was pulled out of the paragraph 2553, but this seems a little convoluted to me, that if a local church decides to leave and everything has been decided by everybody who serves on the annual conference. I hate that the annual conference is used for two separate terms. It's both the overseeing body of a conference and the annual meeting of all of the local churches. Really? You have a book of discipline that's this thick and you couldn't come up with two different words for annual conference? So if I'm reading this to interpret that the disaffiliation has to go to annual conference, the annual meeting of all the local churches, and has to be voted on by all of the other churches, one, that's not right. Two, now you've changed the whole timeline, because now you have to have everything in place before whenever your annual conference meets so that it can be voted on appropriately, and then the disaffiliation can happen. That just shortens this timeline even more. So if your church, and this is why it's important, if you know people, we got to push this video out so people can look at that. I'll give you the links to the actual paragraph. Start asking your pastor. Start reaching out to your district superintendent, asking these questions. Ask to see where it is in writing. Like what is the specifics? What are the other terms that your annual conference is going to apply to your church if you want to leave with your building? And notice I'm really careful to talk about with your building because, well, you can always leave without your building, but we'll do that in a future video. All right, so before we leave this video today, let's look at the terms in paragraph 2553. All right, in part 4, subsection A, we already talked about this one. This is where the annual conference can add whatever appropriate strings they want to this whole thing for you. And then we go down to part B, which is about apportionments, and that you have to pay 2 years worth of apportionments. That's about the money. Part C, the property. And let's see, whose all costs are responsible of the disaffiliating church. So that's about the money. Part D, pension liabilities. That's about the money. Part E, other liabilities, debts, loans, that's about the money. Part F, payment terms. That's about the money. Part G, the Board of Pensions. That's about the money. Part H, let's see, once things have been reimbursed. That's about... So B through H are all about the financial concerns of this. And actually, if we want to go back up to Part A, Standard Terms of Disaffiliation Agreement, the General Council on Finance and Administration shall develop... So finance. So every standard mentioned in this is who's going to be responsible for the money, where's the money going, who's going to get the money, where's the money going to be finalized at, and what's the bottom line. Yeah, human sexuality is the overwhelming issue that's actually eating away at the denomination from within. Okay. Wonder at what point of this do we talk about like doing local ministry and doing God's work? And I guess that's up to you guys as the local church. Here's where it is. There is a provision. That's what this whole video is about. There is a provision in place until December 31st, 2023. Regardless of what side of the aisle you're on in this human sexuality issue, if you think in your heart of hearts that you can serve Jesus Christ better and more effectively and freer outside of the denomination, then this is your chance to, as a church, stand up, speak out, move on, and do what you think you need to do. But I would ask you to pray and pray and pray on it. So make sure your heart's in the right place. So I pray that when you make your decision whether to go or to stay, the one thing you're putting ahead of all of this is Jesus Christ and the truth that we all stand on. All right, take care. God bless.